In September of 1992, two hunters were exploring the Badger Creek Wilderness in Oregon when they made an unexpected discovery: belongings of a missing person. The items belonged to Cory Fay, a 17-year-old who had disappeared nearly a year earlier. They found his backpack and hunting rifle nearby, and authorities later located his jacket on a ridge at about 6,500 feet in altitude. The situation became even more eerie when fragments of his bones and a single tooth were uncovered. But the strangest part of all were the large footprints found nearby, footprints that didn't appear to belong to any ordinary human. Cory was far from an ordinary teenager. Born in Beaverton, Oregon, he had extensive hunting experience and had received professional outdoor survival training. He knew how to survive in the wilderness. On November 23, 1991, Cory and his friend Mark headed out for a hunting trip in the rugged Badger Creek Wilderness, a region known for its elk. They were well prepared, bringing plenty of food, a rifle, and even a thermal blanket for warmth. However, the day didn't go as planned. Despite hours of searching, they hadn't spotted a single animal. And to make matters worse, they began to lose their bearings. By 6:30 p.m., the two decided to split up and search on their own, despite hunting at night being prohibited. When Mark returned to their car later that evening, Cory was nowhere to be found. After waiting and searching for a while, Mark grew worried and contacted the sheriff's office. What followed was a massive search effort, with over 250 people combing the area. They were assisted by helicopters, horses, and trained search dogs. For 10 days, they scoured a 12-square-mile area, but there was no sign of Cory. Months passed, and despite help from volunteers and even the FBI, nothing was found, until nearly a year later when the hunters made their discovery. When investigators returned to the site, they conducted a detailed search. Cory's jacket was found on a steep mountain ridge, buried under deep snow at an altitude of about 6,500 feet, 2,000 meters. A mile away, fragments of his skull and a single tooth were recovered. However, there were no other remains. No ribcage or large bones like femurs, just scattered fragments. The sheriff overseeing the case was puzzled. He remarked that it made no sense. Why would a 17-year-old, no matter how experienced, trek so far in such harsh conditions, climbing to that altitude in deep snow? And then there were the footprints. Large, too large to be human. To this day, no one knows what really happened to Cory Fay. Was it the wilderness itself? A tragic accident? Or as some have suggested, something far more sinister? Whatever the truth may be, it remains one of Oregon's most haunting mysteries. There are so many strange aspects surrounding Cory's death that make it seem even more bizarre and unsettling. After reviewing all the evidence, even the police couldn't come up with a clear explanation. I've gathered some of the most common theories that are circulating online. Let's go through them one by one. The first theory is that Cory was either murdered or accidentally shot. Some media outlets speculated that Cory could have been killed by someone he knew, or perhaps mistaken for an animal and shot by another hunter. At one point, Mark, his hunting partner, was even considered a suspect. However, he easily passed a polygraph test, and more importantly, there was no clear motive. Mark and Cory had grown up together like brothers. Additionally, the fact that Cory's backpack, jacket, and bones were found scattered across 3 completely separate locations made the idea of foul play less likely. It seems improbable that a killer would go through all that effort to scatter Cory's belongings. As a result, this theory started to lose credibility. The second theory is that Cory died from hypothermia. It's possible that he got lost while trying to find his way back and ended up wandering aimlessly. His family supports this idea, thinking that he may have been out there for some time before succumbing to the cold. However, there's a major flaw in this theory. Why would he head uphill? Cory had a compass and knew roughly where their car was parked. Plus, any experienced outdoorsman knows that the best course of action when you're lost is to stay put and wait for rescue. On top of that, Cory had enough food in his backpack and a solar-powered electric blanket. If he used those supplies wisely, he should have been able to survive for several days. The third theory is suicide. One of Cory's classmates mentioned that he'd had a rough week before he disappeared, including an argument with an older student. Some wonder if he became so overwhelmed that he intentionally wandered into the wilderness. However, Cory's family completely rejects this idea. They describe him as a responsible, loving young man who cared deeply about his family, and they're convinced he would never do something so impulsive. Then there's the fourth theory, an animal attack. Some believe Cory might have been attacked by a cougar. However, there's a problem with this idea. Cory was carrying a hunting rifle. It seems unlikely that he would have been caught off guard by such an attack. Even if he had died from exposure and been scavenged by a cougar, why would the animal drag his backpack, jacket, and bones to 3 separate locations? Another odd detail is that his bones were found at an elevation of over 6,500 feet, in a high-altitude, snowy, isolated area. Definitely not a spot where most predators would typically roam. Plus, there were no bite marks, no large chunks of bone left behind. Nothing you would expect from an animal attack. Finally, there's one more theory, and it's the kind that truly sends chills down your spine. On September 18th, 1992, a local newspaper ran a story revealing that during the search for Cory the previous November, a helicopter crew had spotted massive human-like footprints in the snow. At first, they thought the prints were left by searchers, but later, after comparing photos, something shocking was revealed. These footprints were enormous, roughly twice the size of an adult man's foot. They were deeply embedded in the snow, and some of them remained visible even after the snow had melted, suggesting whatever made them was incredibly heavy. The most eerie part was that the footprints appeared to have been made by something walking barefoot. What could have created such footprints? And could they be connected to Cory's disappearance? No one knows for sure. In a strange coincidence, someone in a community discussion about the incident shared similar photos they claimed to have found while hunting in the same area. This sparked a chilling theory that quickly spread across the internet. Cory Fay was killed by giants, creatures like Bigfoot, the Yeti, or wild man beings, which aren't unheard of in the Oregon wilderness. Former California Sheriff David Paulides, who has investigated countless cases of missing persons, made a startling and controversial claim that has left many wondering about the true nature of certain disappearances. Paulides believes that the unexplained vanishing of hikers, hunters, and tourists in national parks and remote wilderness areas may be linked to something far more mysterious than just ordinary accidents or foul play. He suggests that some of these disappearances could be attributed to legendary creatures, like Bigfoot, the Yeti, or other cryptids known to inhabit such regions. With his experience in handling these cases, Paulides has built a case based on evidence, speculation, and numerous eerie incidents that seem to suggest that these creatures may be involved in the strange, often unexplainable disappearances of individuals in some of the most isolated parts of the world. In the case of Cory Field, this theory opens up a chilling possibility. Based on the odd details surrounding his disappearance, his scattered belongings, the bizarre footprints, and the extreme remote locations where his remains were found, one unsettling theory takes shape about how Cory may have met his end that night. On the day of his disappearance, Cory and his friend Mark had separated in the rugged Wallowa Wilderness, each hoping to find signs of the elusive elk they were hunting before the sun dipped below the horizon. Mark, after a short search, returned to their car, but Cory ventured deeper into the forest. As dusk began to settle in, Cory became disoriented. The dense wilderness and harsh terrain were unforgiving, and soon he had lost all sense of direction, unknowingly moving deeper into the wild. With nightfall creeping in, Cory found himself on unfamiliar ground, territory that, unbeknownst to him, was already inhabited by something much larger, something much more dangerous than anything he could have anticipated. At some point, Cory wandered into the domain of a Bigfoot-like creature. As the evening wore on, the creature began stalking him, keeping his distance but following him for a long while. The creature, with its superior strength and stealth, would have had no trouble keeping up with Cory as he grew weaker, disoriented, and vulnerable in the encroaching darkness. When Cory's exhaustion reached its peak, the creature struck. The first things to be lost in the attack were his hunting rifle and backpack, likely discarded in the chaos of the ambush. It's unclear how the creature may have incapacitated Cory, but the nature of the attack seems to suggest that it was swift and brutal. Once Cory was down, the creature dragged his body up a steep mountain ridge, leaving behind pieces of his clothing that investigators later determined marked a second crime scene. The area was high up in the mountains, an isolated and difficult-to-reach spot. Using its enormous feet to easily navigate through the deep snow, the creature carried Cory's remains to an even higher and more remote area, one that was nearly impossible for humans to reach, let alone traverse in such harsh conditions. There, the The creature dismembered Cory, likely consuming parts of his body in a way consistent with the grisly behaviors attributed to some cryptid creatures. The remains were then scattered even farther into the mountains, as if the creature had deliberately hidden them, making the task of finding them nearly impossible. When viewed through this lens, the bizarre details surrounding Cory's disappearance, the scattered belongings, the oversized footprints in the snow, in the distant and remote locations, start to make a grim kind of sense. It paints a picture of a creature that stalked its prey, attacked when it was most vulnerable, and then carried the remains away to conceal the evidence. Though this theory offers a chilling explanation, it remains just that, speculation. However, the mystery of Cory Field's death persists, and these theories are among the most disturbing to those who have followed the case. Sadly, Cory's death remains an unsolved mystery to this day. His family, especially his grandparents, have borne the hardest burden of this tragedy. His grandfather, heartbroken and in disbelief over the ordeal, tearfully reflected on the journey to the spot where Cory's remains were found. To reach the spot where they found his remains, his grandfather said, "That boy would have had to walk 10 miles through deep snow. I can't imagine anyone making it that far. I always told him, if you get lost, head downhill. I can't even fathom what he must have endured out there. Our only wish now is to recover the rest of Cory's remains so we can finally lay him to rest where he belongs." The pain of not knowing exactly what happened to Cory, in the absence of answers, continues to haunt his loved ones, leaving them with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. On October 19th, hunter Mark Stripmatter, 44, went hunting alone in Medicine Bow National Forest and mysteriously vanished. A year later, on October 23rd, 2020, a tourist exploring the area where Mark had disappeared stumbled upon his binoculars and loaded shotgun. Nearby, an unfired bullet was discovered in the Tang Pavilion. Another year passed before Hunter Chris and his nephew came to the Crow Mountains, near the park's border, for a hunting trip. There they accidentally discovered Mark's backpack. Following this lead, search and rescue teams found his folding knife about 300 feet from the scene, along with various items like hats and gear. A human mandible was also recovered. Forensic analysis confirmed the mandible belonged to Mark Stripmatter, the hunter who had disappeared 3 years earlier. Evidence showed he had suffered a severe blow before his death. Even more baffling, his remains appeared to have been transported dozens of kilometers away to Mount Luke. On the morning of October 19, 2019, at approximately 5:30 a.m., Mark was last seen driving a white pickup truck to Medicine Bow National Forest. Surveillance footage from a convenience store captured him at 5:46 a.m., wearing a light camouflage shirt, gray trousers, a large hat, and an orange wool cover. October is a popular time for hunting and for people to go missing. But Mark didn't plan to get lost. He had a specific goal: to hunt a Sasquatch. Medicine Bow National Forest spans over 2 million acres, covering regions of Wyoming and Colorado. The climate in the park is highly unpredictable, with significant temperature differences between morning and evening. The tallest mountains rise above 12,000 feet, approximately 3,600 meters above sea level. The Cats Forest is not only rich in wildlife, but is also steeped in legend, particularly the enduring tales of the Sasquatch. Sightings of the mysterious creature have been reported continuously since the 1970s. Over the years, many park rangers have heard stories, and some even claim to have seen the creature themselves. Mark planned to hunt in an area known as Changi Campground, located deep within the heart of the park. He was well equipped, carrying a high-caliber rifle, a folding knife, binoculars, and a backpack filled with essential survival gear. It's clear that Mark had prepared thoroughly for this expedition. Mark lived with his girlfriend of 13 years, Carrie, who often accompanied him on hunting trips. Around 11 a.m. that day, Mark tried to call her, but she didn't pick up. He then sent her a text message claiming he had nearly killed a Bigfoot. Carrie, however, struggled to make sense of Mark's increasingly paranoid and eccentric behavior. She believed creatures like Bigfoot were nothing more than myths from folklore. That day, the weather forecast had warned of an approaching blizzard. Concerned for his safety, Carrie called Mark back and urged him not to continue hunting in such dangerous conditions. There was a moment of silence on the line, then Mark abruptly hung up. Kelly tried calling Mark again, but was never able to reach him. On October 20th, Kelly returned home and realized that Mark had not come back as expected. Concerned, she went to the police station to check if there had been any reports of an accident involving Mark. Unfortunately, she was the first person to report Mark missing. Local police began investigating Mark Stripmater's disappearance at approximately 3:44 p.m. that day. Instead of going home right away, Kelly drove alone to Changi Campground, the area where Mark had planned to hunt. There, she found Mark's white pickup truck parked at the junction of Forest Highways 801 and 803. By the time Kelly discovered the vehicle, it was already covered in a thick layer of snow. Inside, she found Mark's cell phone, wallet, cigarettes, and other personal items. The keys were located in the vehicle's mailbox, a habit Mark was known for. The only items missing were his shotgun and backpack. Kelly attempted to start the vehicle and found it to be in good working condition, with no signs of damage or malfunction. The presence of the cell phone inside the truck suggested that Mark had briefly returned to the vehicle before heading back into the forest. Following Mark's disappearance, authorities quickly launched an investigation. However, the heavy snow blanketing the mountains made search and rescue efforts extremely difficult. Despite deploying multiple search teams, the initial efforts yielded no results. It wasn't until a year later that a significant clue finally emerged. On October 23rd, 2020, a mountain climber discovered a pair of binoculars and a shotgun in the area where Mark had gone missing, about 600 meters from his vehicle. The tourist who found them informed the police about the condition of the shotgun. When recovered, the shotgun was loaded and an unfired bullet was also found nearby. According to authorities, the weapon had been fired at least once, but the final bullet remained unused. Mark's girlfriend, Kelly, confirmed that the items were indeed the same ones Mark had taken with him on the day he disappeared. Based on this discovery, police concluded that Mark had likely died. A few days later, a team of 12 civilian volunteers organized a search in the area in hopes of finding more clues or possibly Mark's remains, but came up empty-handed. It wasn't until a year later that the case finally saw a significant development. On October 16, 2022, the local police received a call from a hunter who claimed to have discovered Mark Stripmater's remains in Rock Mountain, a location nearly 17 miles from where Mark's vehicle had originally been found. According to the report, a hunter named Chris and his nephew were hunting in the Rock Mountain area when the nephew spotted a backpack on the ground. Inside were clothing and boots. Upon examining the contents, Chris found Mark Stripmater's hunting license. Police later arrived and discovered additional belongings nearby, including a human mandible, several broken ribs, and other personal items such as receipts and a folding knife. These were found within a 300-foot radius of the site. Mark's clothes were also located, but had been completely torn apart. After forensic examination, it was confirmed that the bones belonged to Mark Schrick. His remains showed signs of significant trauma, but the exact cause of death could not be determined. There was no clear evidence of foul play, although investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that he had been attacked and killed by a wild animal. However, it remained unclear what kind of creature could have inflicted such extensive damage. The police later reached out to Mark's girlfriend, Kelly, hoping she might provide new and valuable information. Kelly told them that Mark had once sent her a text message claiming he had nearly captured a Bigfoot. However, since she didn't believe in such creatures, she hadn't taken the message seriously at the time. She also recalled asking Mark why he would go hunting in snowy conditions. Mark explained that Bigfoot was typically extremely cautious and avoided human contact during normal weather, but would let its guard down during snowfall, making it the best time to track it. When asked about Mark's motivation for hunting Bigfoot, Kelly revealed that Mark believed she had been stalked and harassed by the creature. He claimed that while hunting, a large, heavily built beast had followed him down the mountain, even throwing stones at him. Mark had managed to record part of the encounter on his phone. Despite being armed with a powerful weapon, Kelly said Mark had been overwhelmed by fear during the experience. At some point, he became convinced that he had been attacked, or nearly attacked by a juvenile Bigfoot. For Mark, hunting the creature may have been both an act of revenge and a way to prove himself as a skilled hunter, according to Kelly. However, police were unable to draw any solid conclusions based on her statements. Ultimately, Mark's death was classified as an unexplained, possibly supernatural occurrence. Despite the passage of several years, controversy still surrounds the cause of his death. The most widely accepted theory is that Mark may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. In an interview, Mark's father, Mike, expressed doubt that his son could have simply gotten lost. Mark had previously worked as a forest guide and was highly familiar with the terrain and wildlife in the park. However, Mike also acknowledged that his son had a history of drug use. At the time of the incident, Mark was under medical care and taking prescribed medication to support his recovery. Police records support this, showing that drugs used to suppress withdrawal symptoms were found in Mark's backpack. Additionally, 2 other hunters later shared a detail that added another layer to the mystery. On the day of the blizzard, 2 hunters, Jacob and Cameron, reported seeing Mark trekking up the mountain. Concerned about the hazardous conditions, they approached him and warned that hunting during a blizzard was extremely dangerous. An argument broke out between them. In the case report, Jacob noted that Mark was acting strangely, highly agitated and unusually excited, as if he had been provoked or disturbed. One theory suggests that Mark may have been abducted by a UFO. This idea draws parallels to a case from the 1970s, in which a man named Carl Higdon claimed he was abducted by aliens at a campsite in Shawnee and transported to a distant forest. Similarly, Mark's body was eventually discovered in Rock Mountain, about 27 kilometers, 17 miles, from where his truck was found. To hike that distance on foot, especially through snow-covered wilderness at an elevation of over 3,000 meters, about 10,000 feet, would take around 6 hours without rest or food, an unlikely feat under such extreme conditions. For this reason, the alien abduction theory has gained traction with some people. A third popular theory is that Mark fell victim to a legendary creature, possibly Bigfoot. The condition of his shotgun suggested he was either hunting something or defending himself at the time. However, the fact that one bullet remained unfired in the chamber raises the possibility that something happened before he could take another shot. Adding to the mystery, Mark's binoculars and shotgun were found far from the location of his backpack. This discrepancy has led some to speculate that he may have been attacked at Changi Campground, and his body later moved to Rock Mountain. No known North American animal has the strength or behavior to transport a human body several kilometers up a mountain to an elevation of 3,000 meters. During the extensive search operation, rescue teams came across something unusual: massive footprints leading deeper into the mountains. These prints were significantly larger than any known animal tracks in the region, sparking immediate curiosity and concern among the searchers. Despite thorough efforts to trace the origin of the footprints, no conclusive evidence linked them directly to Mark's disappearance. Nevertheless, their existence added another layer of mystery to the case and intensified speculation about what might have happened to him. Some believe these footprints could belong to an unknown creature, possibly the very Sasquatch Mark was reportedly hunting, while others considered less conventional explanations. In the aftermath of the case, famed investigator David Paulides, who specializes in mysterious disappearances in wilderness areas, became involved. Paulides, known for his Missing 411 series, which documents baffling and unsolved vanishings in national parks and forests, interviewed Mark's girlfriend, Kelly, as well as others connected to the case. Intrigued by the strange circumstances and unexplained elements surrounding Mark's disappearance, Paulides chose to include this case in his ongoing research. The inclusion helped bring wider attention to the mystery, sparking new interest and debate among enthusiasts of the unexplained. Even now, years after the incident, Mark's disappearance remains enveloped in uncertainty and unanswered questions. It is a haunting enigma, much like the bullet that was never fired from the shotgun found near his last known location. That bullet symbolizes the unresolved nature of the case. Mark never got the chance to pull the trigger or fully conclude his hunt. Meanwhile, Kelly continues to hold on to hope, waiting for some sign or answer that may never come. The hunt that began with high hopes and careful preparation ended abruptly, leaving behind a story of mystery and loss that still resonates deeply with those who knew him. In 2016, a tourist named Anna Dial was visiting Brazil's Amazonas state when she contacted the local police. After briefly separating from her group in the rainforest, she wandered into an unfamiliar area and stumbled upon several human skeletons. When authorities arrived, they immediately spotted ribs protruding from the soil. A forensic doctor on site took one look and confirmed they were human. A cordon was quickly established. As excavation continued, more ancient bones emerged. Piece by piece, they were assembled into a complete human skeleton. It was soon identified as belonging to Stephen Carr, a British botanist who had gone missing in 2015. Carr had disappeared in the Ulatuma Biological Reserve, located in Amazonas, Brazil, along with a coastal ecological reserve, spanning about 2,200 square miles. This protected area is part of the vast Amazon ecological corridor and shelters numerous rare, vulnerable, and endangered plant and animal species. Local legend speaks of a mysterious presence here known as the plume heat, a being said to emit eerie wails at night that carry for miles. Since the early 20th century, there have been annual reports of encounters with it, and some explorers who braved the rainforest even managed to capture rare footage showing a figure with striking red hair. Today's story begins with a bizarre disappearance. On July 5th, 2015, British biologist Stephen Cavell joined his team in the Black Frog Tuma rainforest, searching for a rare plant believed to cure chronic inflammation and malaria. Around noon that same day, Stephen became separated from the group and wandered alone into uncharted rainforest. After that, all contact with him was lost. Unfamiliar with the dangerous terrain, his teammates did not venture deep into the jungle immediately. Instead, they contacted the reserve manager. By the following morning, a search party had formed. Indigenous guides and volunteers gathered around a campfire, plotting their route. Armed with machetes and shotguns, they sped south on creek jet skis toward the spot where Stephen was last seen. 3 days later came the first lead, a lone backpack, discovered abandoned near a remote riverbank, its contents scattered as if the owner had vanished into thin air. Inside were a camera, a cell phone, and several carefully collected samples of plants, items that hinted at Stephen's scientific curiosity and meticulous nature. Yet alongside the discovery came an almost palpable dread, a quiet alarm that made every searcher's stomach twist. Louis, an Aboriginal guide who had accompanied the search since its outset, tried to maintain hope. His voice, steady but tinged with worry, urged the team to continue searching, insisting that Stephen might still be alive somewhere in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. But even as the team pressed on, an ominous tension hung over the rescue. Every unturned stone, every silent stretch of river seemed to mock them, and with the backpack gone, Stephen's odds of survival had already plummeted. The wilderness, once merely a backdrop to their expedition, now seemed to loom over them like a silent predator, its indifferent vastness swallowing every echo of hope. The search team moved through the breathtaking scenery of the Amazon River, the same beauty, rare plants, and exotic wildlife that had drawn Stephen there in the first place. But beneath the river's muddy surface lurked danger, stealthy caimans and giant, bloodthirsty piranhas. 3 days of searching yielded little. Aside from Stephen's backpack, the team found no useful evidence, only a few abandoned fishing nets and no trace of human activity. The Amazon rainforest hides countless predators, venomous plants, and swarms of disease-carrying mosquitoes. To intrude here unprepared is to step into the territory of lethal creatures. Authorities concluded that Stephen Carr likely fell victim to one of these deadly animals, yet later discoveries hinted at something far stranger and far more terrifying. On the 8th day, Sheriff Theo Ferreira photographed an enormous footprint deep in the forest. Its length was equal to that of 2 adult men's feet placed end to end. Stephen's camera contained nothing beyond standard shots from the expedition, but when investigators accessed his phone, they found something different. Stephen had recorded a chilling piece of footage.
Crap. Alright. It is time to go.
In the recovered footage, Stephen appears disoriented, moving through darkness. The rainforest is alive with unsettling noises, a strange, distant call, followed by the sharp crack of breaking branches. Near the end of the video, something small, a stone or stick, is thrown nearby, landing with a distinct thud. This was the only video on his phone. Checking the call logs, police discovered Stephen had attempted 7 distress calls, none connected. He had been deep in the wilderness, far from any settlement, completely cut off from the outside world. But Sheriff Ferreira would later say the story didn't end there. A year later, tourist Anna Dial contacted the local police, claiming she had stumbled upon ancient human remains in the rainforest after briefly separating from her tour group. By sheer chance, the spot she wandered into was not far from where Stephen's backpack had been found, and she had done so in near darkness. When police arrived, they spotted several ribs protruding from the soil. A forensic doctor immediately confirmed they were human. The area was sealed off, and as excavation continued, more bones surfaced from beneath the earth. Once the bones were assembled, a nearly complete human skeleton was laid out for all to see, all except the skull. Forensic analysis soon confirmed the grim truth. The remains belonged to Stephen Cavall, the British biologist who had vanished a year earlier. On July 5, 2015, around noon, Stephen had entered the rainforest, telling his team he would meet them again that evening. But when night fell, he failed to answer their calls. What they found instead, much later, was a mystery that shattered earlier theories. Police began to suspect Stephen's death might not have been the result of an accident or animal attack, but murder. The questions multiplied. Who would kill him? And why bury his body deep beneath the rainforest floor? Why was his head missing? And why was the burial site so far from where his backpack had been found, with a river lying in between, without a boat? How could Stephen have crossed it? The case defied explanation. One theory suggested that Stephen may have encountered or been targeted by local tribes. Historically, some indigenous groups in the Amazon were known to practice ritual killings. Still, such cases are extremely rare. Today, most indigenous tribes have long abandoned cannibalism, having gradually integrated into modern society and gained access to diverse food sources, education, and healthcare. Practices that were once rooted in survival during periods of scarcity, or tied to deeply symbolic rituals, have largely faded into history. Anthropologists note that while these behaviors were never universal, they captured the imagination of outsiders, often exaggerated in sensational accounts. Yet, exceptions do remain, haunting reminders of humanity's complex past. In 2018, Brazil's Indian Foundation released a video showing the last surviving member of an isolated tribe, living alone deep in the rainforest. Struggling to survive in near total isolation, such individuals may resort to extreme measures, including hunting anyone who enters their territory, not out of malice but sheer necessity. These rare encounters are stark reminders of how isolation can push humans into unimaginable circumstances, a world both alien and eerily primal. Some believe Stephen might have been poisoned by toxic plants he encountered in the rainforest, but that theory fails to explain one crucial fact. He was buried in a mud pit. No wild animal could kill Stephen, bury his body, and leave it there. The grave's soft soil, repeatedly soaked and shifted by heavy Amazon rains, eventually exposed parts of his skeleton. If someone had murdered Stephen, why leave his backpack, containing valuable equipment and cash, by the river in plain view, where any passing boat could spot it? As the investigation grew more chaotic, some members of local tribes put forward a chilling possibility. Stephen may have been killed by the great red-haired apes said to inhabit the region. These creatures, known locally as Mapinguari, are described as massive, bear-like beasts with thick fur and a fearsome presence. They look nothing like stars. Unlike other unidentified creatures, eyewitnesses describe this great ape with disturbing features. A single cyclopean eye, and a gaping mouth in its abdomen used to swallow prey whole. Standing 7 to 8 feet tall and walking upright on 2 legs, it is similar in size to the North American Bigfoot. But unlike Bigfoot, its body reeks with an overpowering foul stench. Locals say these beasts attack their livestock. Some carcasses are found in a grotesque state, tongues and eyeballs missing, and tribal members unanimously blame the Mapinguari. Even survival experts have confronted the possibility of its existence. One of them is Paul, who has lived in the Amazon for nearly 30 years and knows its dangers intimately. His obsession with the Mapinguari began with an encounter in childhood. When he was 6, Paul's father took him on a trip to the Amazon rainforest. Fascinated by an insect on the trail, Paul wandered off, unaware that he was leaving his father's sight. Then, suddenly, he heard 2 deafening growls, sounds no human could make. For context, there are no bears or wolves in this region. The noise was unlike anything he knew, somewhere between a gorilla's roar and a lion's bellow. It was the 1980s, and communication equipment was scarce. Realizing he was alone, panic set in. Around him came the crack of snapping branches, and in the distance, he saw a tree limb swaying violently from side to side. When my father finally found me, I told him we had to leave immediately. As the sun set, the oppressive atmosphere of fear was overwhelming. "I could see true terror in my father's eyes for the first time," Paul later said. Ever since that close encounter with the monster, Paul became obsessed with tracking this giant creature. He spent years venturing deep into the rainforest, and in 2018, he posted a video clip on social media. It showed a massive red-haired ape eating with its back turned. After a few minutes, the creature suddenly rose and vanished into the dense jungle. If genuine, this footage strongly suggests the Amazon is home to previously undiscovered primates. Mysterious zoologist David Oren has studied this creature. He believes it is not the same as the North American Bigfoot, but rather a possible descendant of extinct South American ground-dwelling apes, one of the largest known species. However, there is still no conclusive evidence of its existence. Oren led an expedition deep into the Amazon to search for tracks, collecting suspected hair and feces samples. After testing, these remains were identified as belonging to known historical animals, not the giant ape. Nonetheless, Oren maintains that a colossal primate could still inhabit the rainforest. Yet to this day, no verified photos or videos have surfaced online or through his inquiries. I lean toward believing the Mapinguari belongs to an undiscovered species of giant ape. They resemble the foul-smelling, stinky ape, reportedly seen in Florida swamps. These creatures can wade through marshes, and their long, muscular bodies emit a strong, unpleasant odor. If Stephen had been attacked by this red giant, it could have carried his body several meters with ease. In past reports, some hikers suspected of encountering the Mapinguari described corpses torn apart. Most of the time, the victims were human, and the creatures seemed particularly interested in heads. Why these unknown beings fixate on humans in this way remains a mystery. The Amazon rainforest is one of the richest biodiversity hotspots on Earth. By conservative estimates, it is home to more than 1.5 million species of plants and animals. And each year, scientists continue to discover new ones. Yet countless others remain hidden, waiting to be found. The death of Stephen Carr, like many other mysterious disappearances in this vast wilderness, remains an unsolved enigma. As for the Mapinguari, or perhaps more fittingly the Great Horn, some believe they are the guardian spirits of the rainforest. In their own strange and fearsome way, they protect this untouched jungle from human intrusion.